4 teenage girls, a yogurt shop, and a crime so brutal, Austin is still haunted more than 30 years later. Now, a new HBO documentary is pulling the case back into the spotlight, and today we're going to break down exactly what happened inside that yogurt shop on the night of December 6, 1991. Because once you hear the details, you're going to understand why this case has become one of Texas' most infamous unsolved murders. Good to see you. I'm Amy. Let's recap. It's a Friday night in North Austin, December 6, 1991. Inside a strip mall yogurt shop, 17-year-olds Jennifer Harbison and Eliza Thomas are working the closing shift at I Can't Believe It's Yogurt. After work, they're having a slumber party. Eliza is going to sleep over at Jennifer's, and so is their friend, 13-year-old Amy Ayers. Amy's close to Jennifer's little sister, 15-year-old Sarah. Those two spent most of the night at the mall down the street before they walked over to the yogurt shop to help the other girls close up. But none of them ever walk out of that store again. So just before midnight, a patrol officer spots smoke pouring from the yogurt shop. Within minutes, nearly 50 emergency responders are racing to the scene. Local news crews nearby rush over, cameras rolling, thinking they're about to cover a small fire. But when the flames die down, the real horror comes into view. In the back, 3 of the girls are found naked, tied up, and gagged with their own clothes, each shot in the head once. Their attackers had piled some of the bodies together. Sarah and Eliza on top, and Jennifer's beside them, but like she maybe rolled off, like they were all 3 piled up together like firewood. Amy Ayers is different. She's found apart from the girls. Her body isn't quite as burnt as the others. She was also shot twice in the head with 2 different guns, the only one to be killed that way. And for reasons investigators still can't explain, there's like a knotted t-shirt under her, sort of wrapped like around her neck. The burn patterns tell more of the story. The fire started near the back door, where dry goods, paper cups, napkins had been piled on top of the bodies. The whole area was soaked in lighter fluid before it went up in flames. So whatever evidence might have survived the fire was likely destroyed by the water used to put it out. Well, maybe the men came to rob the place. $540, the night's take, was missing. Or maybe the girls were the real target. Possibly both. Either way, this wasn't just a robbery. The 4 girls were herded at gunpoint into a back storage room, ordered to undress, their own underwear used to tie their hands behind their backs. At least 2 of them were sexually assaulted. Now, they were the girls next door. All 4 shared a tight bond through their school's Future Farmers of America program. Jennifer Harbison was the chapter president and a varsity track star. Her younger sister Sarah juggled volleyball, basketball, and cheerleading. Sometimes she'd play in a game and then change uniforms and cheer for the boys' team on the same night. Eliza Thomas excelled in agricultural mechanics, welding, and small engine repair. Amy Ayers was a smart, well-liked 8th grader. They all loved animals. Jennifer and Sarah raised lambs, and Eliza and Amy raised pigs. Wherever one went, the others weren't far behind. Now, their backgrounds is also part of what makes this case so unusual. These are 4 strong country girls. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to get taken down easily. Whatever happened, it was obviously more than one person. The 2 guns says that. And to control 4 girls like this, police thought they were looking for pros. But 8 days later, a break in the case put 4 teenage boys on police radar. Maurice Pierce and Forrest Wellborn. They're both 16. They're picked up at the North Cross Mall, just down the street from the yogurt shop. Maurice was carrying a loaded .22 caliber pistol and bullets, the same type of gun used to kill the girls. During questioning, the story takes a turn. Maurice claims it's not just the same type of gun, it's the gun. But he doesn't say he pulled the trigger. He blames that on Forrest. He tells them they stole a car after the murders and went to San Antonio that weekend with the yogurt shop cash and 2 other friends, Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott. But if police thought they just cracked Austin's most infamous case, they're wrong. Maurice is a 9th grade dropout with a serious drug problem. Forrest flat out denied having anything to do with the murders, although he did admit that, yeah, they had both been at the mall that night, the same place Amy and Sarah were hanging out. But the other two guys, Mike and Rob, they also denied knowing anything about the murders. And Maurice, he doesn't seem to know any solid details about the crime, or if he did, police can't seem to get at them. The harder they press, the more his story drifts away from what they actually found at the scene. They even wire him up, hoping he'll get Forrest to confess on tape, but Forrest doesn't bite. And the .22 caliber pistol? Well, Maurice swore it was the murder weapon, but ballistics can't match it to the bullets from the scene. And then there are the polygraphs. They all pass, saying they didn't do it. So just when police thought they'd nailed it, the case collapses and the guys walk free. But only for a handful of years. We're going to come back to them, and believe me, it's worth waiting for. By the start of 1992, frustration is boiling over, and police need to give the public something. So they call a press conference. They don't have a suspect, but they do have a profile built with help from the FBI's behavioral science unit. According to the profile, the killers are likely a group of friends led by one dominant figure, probably white, in their teens or early 20s. The leader is a high school dropout with anger issues and a criminal record, still living possibly with his parents within a mile of the yogurt shop and not exactly big on personal hygiene. In other words, they're looking for a mean, dirty kid with a bad attitude. Meanwhile, 3 new names surface. Just a month before the yogurt shop murders, a woman was abducted and assaulted from a honky-tonk less than a mile away, a place called the Cavity Club, which is terrible name. The crime was so similar, the timing so close, that it was hard to believe it was a coincidence. And then came another lead, connecting the 2 crime scenes. A witness told police they saw a man parked outside the yogurt shop that night. They thought he was possibly Hispanic, shoulder-length dark hair, sitting in an older white sedan, maybe a Chevy. So when police released a sketch, the calls came in fast. People noticed it looked almost identical to a sketch of one of the Cavity Club suspects, a man named Albert Jimenez Cortez. Cortez was part of a motorcycle club called the Mierdas Punks. The other 2 Cavity Club suspects, Porfirio Villa Saavedra and Ricardo Hernandez, were in it too. And all 3 of them, they fled to Mexico right after the night of the yogurt shop murders. In October of 1992, Porfirio and Albert were arrested in Mexico. Because they were Mexican nationals, they went on trial there, not in the U.S. While in custody, both men reportedly confessed to the yogurt shop murders, but then they quickly took it back, and investigators could never find solid evidence linking them to it. But the 3rd suspect, Ricardo Hernandez, he was never caught. And just when you think the suspect list couldn't get any darker, it does. In 1998, death row serial killer Kenneth McDuff, the broomstick murderer, he confessed to the yogurt shop killings right before his execution. Now, McDuff's record is pure horror. Back in 1966, he kidnapped 3 people, shot 2 men, and strangled a woman with a broomstick. He went to prison, got released in 1989, and almost immediately started killing again. In December 1991, the same month as the yogurt shop murders, he abducted Colleen Reed from a car wash kind of near the yogurt shop. He later fled to Kansas City under a fake name, but by then he was already wanted for another murder, 22-year-old Melissa Northrup, a pregnant mother of 2. That crime earned him the death penalty. While in prison, he admitted to killing more than a dozen women, but police suspected that his yogurt shop confession was just a ploy to delay execution. If so, it didn't work. McDuff was executed in November of 1998. DNA testing later cleared him from the yogurt shop murder, and investigators couldn't put him at the scene that night. By 1999, nearly a decade after the murders, police circled back to a familiar group, the teenagers they'd first looked at in 1991. There was a new task force by this time. They were taking a look at everything, and they looked again at Maurice Pierce's confession back in 1991. But this time around, they zeroed in on the other 2 guys, Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott. So back in 91, Rob, Mike, and Forrest all went to McCallum High School. The girls went to Lanier, though Eliza had transferred there from McCallum, which is a loose connection, but in a case this cold, any link mattered. Rob dropped out soon after the murders and he moved to West Virginia. Mike stayed in Austin working as a mechanic. So in 1999, after 4 days of interrogating Mike, 18 hours total, and at one point with a literal gun held to his head, Mike signed a detailed confession. He named Robert Springsteen, Maurice Pierce, and Forrest Welburn as the other doers. What's coming next is straight from Mike Scott's own statement. All right, he says, they were at the mall that Friday, December 6, 1991, sitting at the food court when Maurice says he needs money so they should rob someplace. So the guys drive around the businesses near the mall, scoping them out. He says this is still during the day, and they spot the yogurt shop. They go in and, quote, Maurice buys a yogurt swirl, chocolate and vanilla. I follow Rob inside. I sit down and Rob comes over and says something to me, and we got up and made it look like we were going to the restroom. Maurice was up at the counter talking to at least one of the girls. I remember he was talking to the dark-haired girl. Maurice was supposed to distract them. Rob and I walked out the back and walked around to the front of the building. When we got around to the front, Maurice was already in the car eating his yogurt. We drove back to the mall. So they go back to the food court. They sit there longer, a little bit. Then they walk around the mall until it gets dark, and then they go back to the yogurt shop. But this time, he says they pull into the back because they left the back door slightly open. Forrest waits in the car as a lookout. Maurice pulls out his gun. Rob also has a gun on him. He says, before we went in, Maurice told me to make sure that I brought the can of Zippo lighter fluid. It was the bigger metal can. I believe Maurice wanted to use it to cover our tracks. We went into the back door. Maurice went in first, then Rob, and then I followed them. One of the girls said something like, hey, you, what are you doing? You don't belong in here. And this girl was wearing a t-shirt, I believe, that had the name I Can't Believe It's Yogurt on it. I believe that she was working in the back room when we entered through the back. Rob told me to stop and stay right there and not let anyone out the back. We were all surprised because we expected to find only 2 girls inside the store, and there were 2 other girls up at the front in the dining room area sitting down. I could see the commotion going on up front. I remember Maurice told me to check the front door to make sure it was locked. He also told me to check to see if there was anyone out front that could see us. I checked the door and it was locked. There was one key in the lock. The door was locked. I looked outside to make sure no one was looking in. As this went along, I got more and more scared. I heard the cash register open. I heard the drawer being lifted and slammed back. I saw Maurice at the cash register and I saw him put something in his pocket. I thought to myself that he had just put money in his pocket. All the girls were in back with Rob. There was a lot of yelling about the money. See, the day shift had already made the drop into the office safe, so there was only $540 left in cash from the night shift. Mike told the police all of that in his statement, which, not all of it, but a lot of it, police say lined up with the evidence. The front door was locked. The key was still in the lock. The fact that he thought the 2 extra girls were in the front sitting down. There was one table with chairs still sitting down, like the chairs hadn't been put up, as if somebody had been sitting there till the last minute. He also told them he saw Rob sexually assault one girl, and Rob forced him to do the same, but he couldn't do it. So then he claimed that Maurice and Rob forced him to shoot 2 of the girls with the .22, but he didn't want to do it. He did it, but he didn't want to do it. He also allegedly told them things he would only know if he was there, like the fact that he heard one of the girls get slapped. Now this is interesting because Amy Ayers had a bruise on the inside of her lip, like she'd been hit hard. He also claimed the other guys told him to set the fire. He says, quote, I saw the girls laying there and I pulled one of the girls on top of the other. Rob was watching me as I gathered up napkins, cups, and paper towels and piled them on top of the 3 girls. I sprayed Zippo fluid on top of the girls. I emptied the can of lighter fluid. I had a Zippo lighter with me and I lit the fire. I heard a whoosh sound of the accelerant when it caught fire. I don't remember what I did with the can. I could have thrown it on the pile of stuff in the back of the store. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting and a little controversial. The Austin Fire Department's original investigator concluded that the blaze started on a shelf along the back wall near where the bodies were found. But after Michael's 1999 confession, the state brought in a new expert from the ATF, and this second guy says He never saw the crime scene in person, yet he concluded that the fire did start on top of the 3 stacked bodies, ignited through the styrofoam cups and paper products piled on top of them, exactly the way that Michael had described it. So when police questioned Rob, he corroborates a lot of the details in Mike's confession. He says he propped open the back door with like a folded cigarette case or a small rock so it wasn't noticeably open. And he described the position Amy was left in. And both men said they stopped at a nearby bridge and threw up after the murders. So investigators believed they finally had the pieces. Rob, Maurice, and Mike came in through the back door while Forrest acted as lookout. In October of 1999, all 4 were arrested, but the case didn't stick. Charges against Maurice and Forrest were dropped for lack of evidence, and they refused to admit to anything Mike and Rob had said about them in their confessions. But first, I gotta tell you what happened to Maurice. He walked away from the yogurt shop case, but his story didn't end there. 19 years later, in December of 2010, he met a violent end. He was pulled over for running a red light. He jumps out of the car, he takes off running. But when officers catch up to him, there's a struggle. The cop tried to tase him, but Maurice allegedly grabbed a knife from his duty belt and slashed the man's neck. The officer drew his gun and shot him. Maurice was still able to run off, but he collapsed and was found dead nearby. But the yogurt shop case was far from over. Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott were the only 2 to stand trial. The main evidence were their own words, especially the details that Mike gave in his confession. Now, both men later recanted those statements, took it all back, said that they were coerced into him, but it didn't matter. The jury decided that they were guilty. Mike got life in prison and Rob was sent to death row. And then came the twist. Their convictions were overturned on constitutional grounds. The 6th Amendment gives defendants the right to confront their accusers, but in both trials, each man's confession was used against the other, but neither was allowed to question the other in court. So by 2009, prosecutors are gearing up for a new trial. They think these are the guys, we're taking them back to court. This time, they want a slam dunk. So they tested the semen DNA recovered from Amy Ayers, hoping it will be the smoking gun to finally put the killers away. But the DNA doesn't match any of these 4 guys. That one result was enough to set Michael and Robert free and leave police right back where they started with 0 suspects. So who does it belong to? For years, investigators chased that mystery. And then in 2017, an Austin detective ran the sample through a public online DNA database used for population studies. Incredibly, he got a hit. The most promising lead in decades. Here's the catch. The matching sample was submitted by the FBI anonymously with no name attached. So when Austin police asked them for it, the FBI refuses, citing privacy laws. But the twist doesn't end there. In 2020, with more advanced testing, they test that DNA sample again, the one from the crime scene, and they pull additional genetic markers. And suddenly, it no longer matches the FBI sample at all. So that's where they're at with that. There's still a tiny amount of DNA left though, but investigators are holding on to it, hoping that science will advance enough to give them one last shot at identifying the killer. Apparently, it's not enough to use a genetic database, like the way we caught Brian Kohberger, the Golden State Killer. So many of these cases solved that way, but apparently it's not enough to do that in this case. As one official put it, there's very little left, and that's why we're waiting for the science to improve. And now, with the new HBO docuseries shining a spotlight back on the yogurt shop murders, investigators are hoping it sparks the tip that will finally crack this case wide open. As one of them put it, somebody out there knows something. And isn't that the thing with cold cases? Over time, people realize that it's time to start talking. Maybe somebody died, maybe somebody broke up, maybe somebody got divorced. Now it's time to finally talk. Let's hope that happens in this case because it's been more than 3 decades. 4 young girls murdered, no one held accountable. So here's the question for you. After all these years, is the killer still out there? Is the killer still walking free? Could you be the one who has the missing piece? Let's talk about it in the comments. Thanks for spending your time with us. Chris and I are here 3 times a week with new recaps. Remember to like and subscribe so you never miss a story. And until next time, take care.